Good morning, everyone, and welcome. As we've heard pretty much all day yesterday and this morning as well, this is a really exciting time for all of us to transform India with the power of AI, to break down the barriers of language, of capabilities, of capacity, of capital, to democratize knowledge and expertise, and in doing so, include the excluded. We've just conducted a study that's a deep dive into the state of generative AI in India. It's a state of the union, if you will, and there's a couple of headlines that I'd like to share with you. One, India Inc. is really optimistic about Gen AI, and there's a great degree of urgency as well. 60% of the CXOs we surveyed believe that Gen AI will have a high to existential impact on their businesses. Second, 70% of the CXOs say that their state of readiness to adopt Gen AI is low to moderate. And there's a bunch of risks and concerns around it that have to do with skill gaps, that have to do with models, that have to do with data privacy, that have to do with hallucinations, and of course, the costs. And third, based on our deep dive into the economic impact, we believe that over the next 6 years, by 2030, Gen AI can potentially add $1.2 to $1.5 trillion to India's GDP. And the impact is massive across sectors. 70% of the impact, we believe, will come in business services, which includes IT, ITES, BFSI, healthcare, education, etc. So what we thought we'd do today is to double-click into these headlines and really focus this discussion on 4 key themes. The first is around opportunities. Where is the impact happening? The second is around risks. Where do we see the risks? And perhaps more important, how can we mitigate those risks? And the third, which is really important to me and I think to all of us, is how do we keep humans at the center of this transformation? And finally, what role can and should the government play in enabling this progress? It's my privilege, really, to be moderating this session today with 2 distinguished tech sector leaders. Thank you, Ashwin, and thank you, Daisy, for joining us today. And with your permission, maybe we'll dive right into it and start with the opportunities discussion. So, Ashwin, I'll start with you. Capgemini, as we all know, has been a leader in AI. And you've stated that you're seeing a very clear demand for strong Gen AI services. And I was curious, how are you seeing this play out in India, specifically in terms of revenue uplift in your own business and that of your clients?
So first, thank you for that question, Nitin. And first thing I realized is I need to use Gen AI to update my public profile. So it's the same one which we've been using for a long period. So jokes apart, as in Capgemini Research Institute did very recently a research. And what was interesting is 76% of the CXOs said they would use Gen AI for creating new products and solutions. 71% of them said they would like to use it for creating new customer experiences. There are many other things, but this space is really the interesting space. When we work in a services industry, anything which impacts the revenue of a customer is always the more exciting part than saving the costs for the customer. So what we've seen is, and some of these are India examples, some of them are clients, and some of them are global examples. Building on the research, we see there is an aircraft manufacturer which is using Gen AI to find and design the right materials to reduce the weight of the aircraft. One of the auto customers, and we all seen it, now you have very fancy dashboards on your cars. The problem is they're too fancy and at times you struggle. One of them is using Gen AI to be actually online virtual assistant to help you with your questions and queries while you are driving. Now, of course, it has its own risks. We'll delve with it later. One very interesting example, a consumer product company like L'Oreal. They're very much keen and made significant progress on sustainable products. One of the things they have done is they've combined GenAI with digital twins. And anyone who's interested in their product can scan their QR codes, get every detail about the product, the ingredients, how it is made, what impact can it have on your skin, and also if you want to use it, how to use it, all without any customer service intervention. There's another very interesting example in utilities. Gridmatic, you would have seen. Today, most customers want renewable energy. What Gridmatic is doing is, based on their customer needs, they're figuring out what is the best time, best way to generate renewable energy, wind or solar, and they are powering data centers fully on CFEs or carbon-free energy. Great use case. And then again, financial services is always a great consumer of technology. One of the customers is building a model where, the belief is ChatGPT is a solution which brings your wealth advisor, your chief economist, your commodities trader, and your equities trader all in one. Yeah. And that's the way they look at using ChatGPT. And again, what's interesting in all of this is it's not about cost saving, it's about creating revenue streams for our clients. And that's what we see as Capgemini. We are doing more than 300 projects with our clients, and they're way beyond POCs. And some of the examples I gave are our clients. So I think it's a great opportunity both for services industries to help the clients leverage GenAI in their products, revenues, and then, of course, for our clients to use it to drive their revenue growth.
I think that's terrific, and thanks for sharing those examples around the revenue uplift, because a lot of the discussions we hear and we have about AI and Gen AI are centered around productivity and efficiency and experience, which are very important. But I think the next wave of transformation and the value uplift is going to have on the revenue side. So thanks for sharing that. But not to miss the productivity and the efficiency and the internal disruption that's happening with Gen AI. Daisy, if I can come to you, what are the kinds of things that you're seeing and you're doing within Cisco to really reap the benefits of Gen AI from an internal value perspective?
Thank you, Nitin. It's wonderful to be here and be part of the conversation over the last 2 days, including today. So I think that there are two recognitions, and they are not aha moments. Most businesses have the same recognition. Firstly, as large businesses who've been in existence for a long time, and Cisco is certainly one of those, we have at least 3 to 4 times unstructured data than we have structured data. And here comes a technology which can help us unleash the power of that unstructured data. So that's one. 2, it's a technology that's getting better in leaps and bounds. It's getting smarter day by day, or by the minute, or by the second. And so just like information technology drove the cost of data to zero, we believe Gen AI, at Cisco we believe Gen AI will drive the cost of knowledge activation to zero. So that's the second place we see value in AI, and more specifically Gen AI. And the last thing, it doesn't matter what sector you're in, what products or services you build. If you have one employee and you have one customer, then you're in the experience business. And there's plenty of conversation around there that experience will be the only differentiator in a few years from today. And Gen AI is a technology that can help us, not just the only one, but one of the technologies that can help us curate better experiences all around. So with this understanding in mind, we at Cisco, we think along 3 vectors. Right? Obviously, the immediate value vector. Immediate value vector is something that lots of conversations are happening. How do you reimagine the daily tasks that a business does internally or externally? Clearly, at the forefront of that is automation of mundane, repetitive tasks. Also tasks where the cost of human error is very high. And we work in spaces like cyber, so we can speak to that with a lot more authority. It's not just about what is boring and exhausting for human beings, but also where the cost of human error is very high. So that's that first conversation about immediate value. Then we talk about the intermediate value vector. And in the intermediate value vector, we put things like software development, process re-engineering, learning and development. These are about reshaping critical functions inside the company. Because a lot of what we do is creating, the heart of it, we build products and we deliver services. A lot of our IP and differentiation is in the software we build, as an example, the processes we use externally and internally, and of course how good our people are. In the tech space, you're only as good as your people are. So that's a space where we are reshaping critical capability using GenAI. That's one space. And the third one, Ashwin's ending point, we are also thinking on the incremental vector. The incremental vector is all about new revenue streams and is about new experiences. As an example, I mean, we've been using AI in our technologies for almost a decade now. But what you will see already in Cisco Tech, and if you're a Cisco client, please go look for it or ask about it, because you may not even notice it is GenAI powered. But you will see assistants. You will see AI assistants in our technologies. As an example, for hybrid workers, we have a platform called WebEx. What WebEx does very well is it's combining RMMs, real-time media with LLMs, real-time media models with large language models, to make the experience and the productivity of the hybrid worker better. We have an assistant in our security technology, which is actually going to intermediate value pools of many companies who built a business around creating policy engines and updating policy engines and cleaning up policy engines. So there is very clearly the experience and the revenue vector as well. And we are thinking in all of these three vectors to bring the value of GenAI both internally to the business, but also in externally how we serve our customers, the countries we work in, and the communities we impact.
That's terrific. And if I could just ask you one quick one to follow up on that, Daisy. Who have you made in charge within your own organization to drive this change, A, for value discovery, and then to make sure that this is happening at a certain intensity within the organization?
I think the speaker from PepsiCo yesterday, she spoke about it. At the top of the position has come from Chuck Robbins, who's our chair and CEO, and he makes this statement, and please don't think of us as a slow organization, but he says we will go slow to go fast. That's the directional and strategic setting. That is basically saying that that is an acknowledgement from a tech company with responsibility that this is a technology that has the ability to create different outputs in different industries and economies and communities. So there'll be lots of experiments going on internally, grounds up, but there will also be lots of oversight coming from the top in terms of policy and guardrails and frameworks. The point I was making about the PepsiCo speaker yesterday, and thing we have in common with them, is that we like to work on use cases where the impact certainly is quantifiable, but the implications are also quantifiable. And when in doubt, we want to do internal experiments because we don't think we want hallucinations to hurt our customers, our partners, the communities we serve, or our business. So we do that. We already have a framework which prioritizes transparency and ethics over everything else we do. So that's core to everything that happens.
Yeah.
And there's a functioning AI committee with broad stakeholdership across the company globally, of which I'm also a part, which talks through, this is not the ethics piece of this is not black and white, right? Different things it's a gradient. And I think Minister Chandrasekhar referred to it as well as yesterday. This is the first time, at least in my almost 30 years in tech, we've got to think about the ethical considerations of something that we're doing. So everybody's thinking about it, but everybody's lens on this solution is different, and there's a lot of conversation internally and externally on how do we shape this in the interest of the business, but also more broadly in the interest of humankind.
Right. A great point on impact and implications, and in fact, that brings us to our second theme, which is around risks. So Ashwin, as you're aware, there's no conversation around AI or Gen AI where people don't talk about risks, and it's so central to the discussion. Now, while we see some organizations that have jumped into mostly the shallow end of the pool, there are others who are on the sidelines waiting to see what happens with the early adopters. What are you seeing with your clients, and what advice would you have for business leaders who are on the sidelines?
So, like with any new technology, and this is one of the most disruptive technologies, you always have half glass full, half glass empty, the way you look at it. I think what's important to recognize, what are the risks which come in with AI? And I think a lot has been said over the last few days. Are the models explainable? Can they really explain how the output's coming through? Are they fair? Is the data behind those models using a large set to be fair to all race, color, creed, different attributes? Are they sustainable? I think we've heard a lot about how much energy these models consume. So are they sustainable? Are they dependable? Then there's also another angle to these models is who really owns the IP? I think we're all thrilled to use it. Imagine you were the IP contributor and not getting credit for it. Okay. So I think all these things need to be looked at when you are doing any of these models. One thing you have to recognize is LLMs are large language models. They are not large knowledge models. And simple test, if you have laptops open, try to multiply 6 digits by another 6 digits on ChatGPT. 99% of the times it's wrong. You're better off using a calculator to do it. Okay. So again, you need to understand you can't use it for everything. So what we would look at is, whenever you're trying to implement, we advise our clients, first be clear what model you want to use. Does it meet all the attributes of explainable, fair, dependable, sustainable? The second key thing is, you also need to think about, to make it effective, what kind of architecture you want to use. Do you want to go LLMs? Do you want to go SLMs? Do you want to use RAG architecture? There are many technicalities behind it. So be clear. The use case itself, you need to understand what use case you're trying to drive. And last, and equally important, is the human impact of any of those use cases. And taking these considerations, what we normally try to do is classify use cases in 3 buckets. The usual, simple, straightforward, which is a lot of content creation. The human impact is less, much more simpler to implement. A lot of customer service type of use cases, much faster to do, much lesser impact on some of the considerations I said. The second one, and they were actually some of the revenue ones I talked about, are use cases which use slightly more complex models. These are also use cases where there is a lot more complex algorithm behind it and using a lot more data. So it could be use case like, as I said, designing products for our clients, using or creating new services for our clients, and they will be using it. So those are the second grade of risk. And third is absolutely very, very high risk. One example is, again, it's a great opportunity, but if you are going to use LLMs in the healthcare sector, because you are going to impact the lives of people, And then the second area is a lot of social security benefits which governments do, or sometimes the security itself uses models which could be based on prior data or the limited data of caste, color, creed. And those are very high risk. So we try to categorize when we tell our customers the kind of use case you're going to use, let's see where it falls in, and then again ensure all the right guardrails are put in place, to ensure dependability, ensure fairness, the sustainability. So that's the approach we take. That's how we advise our clients to manage a great tool, but also manage the risks around deploying that great tool.
Thank you, Ashwin. I think that's a great elaboration of the fact that risks are not dichotomous. You really have to prioritize and then map the risk severity to the use case, which is essential. Daisy, let me come to you on the risk mitigation agenda. So risk mitigation agenda is, again, very central to the Gen AI community. I think there's a lot of great work happening today for instance, in the area of anti-hallucination layers that sit on top of LLMs and are able to, for instance, cross-check answers, right? There's terrific work going on in the area of differential privacy, in the area of anonymization, in the area of watermarking of data sets. What is your perspective when it comes to risk mitigation? How do we layer that when we are looking at use cases? And again, what advice would you have for business leaders here?
Yeah. So, you know, a lot of what you mentioned is in the realm of people who really work with the technology, right? So I'm a business leader, so there are some layers we can put on top of that. I already referenced a couple of them previously. Obviously, having a framework that prioritizes transparency and ethics and put everything you do in the AI space, or any space for that matter, through the litmus test of whether it stands up to your principles that you've defined in your ethics and responsible and transparent AI framework. That's one. But we are in a tech summit, and tech has the ability to deal with risks that emerge from everywhere. So, you know, as an example, when we did an AI readiness survey with all of our clients earlier this year, it was interesting to note that 1 out of 4 organizations, they talked about either some kind of virtual ban or going slow on Gen AI, simply because they were concerned about data security. Now, there's enough great tech out there to not make that the reason for not doing what you want to do with Gen AI. The other conversation is, you know, if machines write code or AI engines write code, unsupervised fashion, and there are errors, can you catch it? And the fact is, yes, you can use observability technology to look at, you know, pieces of code that don't work or don't work the way it's supposed to work or not with the same degree of efficiency it's supposed to work. So there's already technology out there which can be mitigating risks coming out of AI and Gen AI. I think the second piece is, you know, as business leaders, just like you plan for any risk, you've got to have a risk management framework for AI too. And in that risk management framework is the place where obviously you assimilate all of your awareness around where and how is AI being used in your enterprise internally or externally. You've got to quantify all your internal and external risks, and that's what Ashwin talked about, the categorization of risks and impacts that they can create. And you've also got to lay out actions. What happens when something goes wrong? I think all of these three pieces have to be, we've got to build a risk management framework for AI inside businesses, maybe not as a standalone, because, you know, this is a horizontal. So as part of your overall risk management framework, the AI implications, the AI chapter or the addendum has got to be built. I talked already about having a firm policy and the litmus test and so did Ashwin, about transparency, fairness, ethics. The last one, we are all upskilling our people on AI. And if no one is, we should think about doing that. And what are the roles that the people, so there's awareness, which I talked about all the way from the grassroots of the organization to the leadership of the organization. Beyond awareness, I think serious education, depending on what role you play, is also important. But one of the reasons for building that, having that education is not just to work on AI and AI relate, you know, where can AI create impact to the business, it's also to provide human oversight for AI, and particularly if you live in industries where, you know, Ashwin talked about healthcare, to provide human oversights in deployment models which are highly regulated industries, or to provide human oversight for things that you don't want to do as a business. You know, if your risk appetite for something is lower, then you provide a human oversight to it. So there's technology, there's your AI framework, there's your risk management framework, and there is human oversight. I think as a business leader, you've got to be able to look at all of this in addition to the controls that will come up from the AI ecosystem itself.
That's terrific. I'm cognizant of time, so I'm going to just run through the next couple of questions. Ashwin, let's get to the topic of humans at the center. I think you've stated on more than a couple of occasions that a leader's role in creating harmony between people and machines in the age of Gen AI will be very critical to success. Do you think that Indian organizations and leaders are doing enough to enable and help the workforce address the psychology of disruption and really manage the cultural change and the organizational change that is so critical, because oftentimes we step back and we're just talking pyramids and numbers and productivity, and we're not really putting humans at the center of this transformation. Curious to get your thoughts.
So again, it's not for me to judge if they're doing enough. I don't have enough data points. But what I can say is, I think everybody in this room knows Moore's law. There's another law which is actually reverse of Moore's. It's called Irum's. Actually, it came from pharma industry. So the concept of Irum's law was the productivity of R&D and research in pharma is exponentially decreasing. Okay, that's what the law states, or experientially it states. Now, there is an application of it in organizations, and the way, the people who do organization studies say it is, for an organization, the change in technology is exponential, while the adoption of a technology in an organization is at best logarithmic or even not that. So what you really realize is it's not a technology challenge, it's actually how fast and what the organizations want to adapt to consume the technology. That becomes the key problem in any such disruption. And what I would recommend, and that's what we tell our clients, is a simple 4C principle to manage the change. First is communicate. So let your teams know what's the roadmap, what are you trying to do with Gen AI, how you want to do it. So that's a lot of change management on communication. The second C is co-create. I think we need to use our teams themselves, our employees themselves, to create some of the solutions, and frankly, what is available on the net actually enables it. The third thing is collaboration. Again, it's very, very important that you're collaborating with different ecosystem to ensure, we are getting the right inputs, you're getting the right outputs. Again, your employees are part of it. And lastly, it's important to calibrate. It's not a project, it's not a change which you can do forever and expect there may not be some pitfalls in the way. So you have to calibrate on the way. And that's how, it's the fifth C is how you manage the culture of the organization to embrace it. I just want to conclude saying, there's always a lot of fear about AI or any tool. First, it's not AI which builds AI, it's humans which build AI. And the second thing is, it's not AI which replaces a human, it's a human that is leveraging AI replaces another human. So what it shows is, again, it's finally the human is at center of making these decisions and driving this change management.
That's very helpful, Ashwin. Daisy, if I can come to you for the last question, really, on the role of the government. I think we've had a lot of discussion on what the government is doing, what it can do, and I think given the tremendous success we've seen with digital public goods like UPI, Aadhaar, etc., I think there's a lot of hope and optimism. But the question I had was not so much around the digital public goods aspect of AI. It's more to do with how do we want the government to balance the need for speed and innovation on the one hand with the need for safety, responsibility, trust, security on the other. There is no perfect answer, but would love to get your perspectives.
So I think we're in a good place there, if you ask me, because in the past, when any new tech arrived on the horizon, the question would always be innovation or regulation. So the good news about AI is there is a unified thought process, not just in India, but also many countries around the world, that this is one where we've got to do innovation and regulation for all the right reasons, because this is one of the most disruptive. While all technologies are disruptive, the exponentiality of disruption in this case is, we don't need to talk about it after having sat here for the last 24 plus hours. The trick is going to regulate for criminality is very easy. I think that one is much easier to figure out for. I'm not sure, frankly, I don't think I'm even qualified to talk about the ethics piece, which is where a lot of the regulation around AI, right? So the question is, What can it do for humanity is what a lot of our conversations are about. What can it do to our humanity is really the big question for which there is no answers. And I think AI regulations will start to step in that direction. Minister Chandrasekhar actually alluded to it briefly yesterday, saying that my ethics and your ethics is not the same. You know, the ethics of a business and an ethics of another business is not the same, of one country versus another country is not the same. How do you get to standardization in this environment is going to be, I think, the big trick. The regulating for criminality is not a problem. There we already have existing laws. For example, you've got cybercrime. What AI does in cybercrime can be, like I said, another integration point into existing regulation. The interesting conversation, and frankly I am unable to answer it, is going to be this intersection of this humanity and ethics consideration with AI and the government's role in having to play the regulator there. Keeping communities, especially the disenfranchised communities, you know, we've talked about in the case of digital, India has done a really good job to the point about DPI. Digital could easily have been a further divisional game for India, but because of DPI, we've made sure that the digital divide does not happen in India. The next set of regulations is to ensure the AI divide does not happen in India, and it will border, I don't think, on what is black and white and easy to call out, but on what we decide is going to be the black and white for humanity in the future.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a lot more coming, both within India and globally, but I think we are on time now, so just quick closing comments, Ashwin, from you. If we think about the huge India opportunity before us, what would you like to leave the audience with? And then I'll come to you, Daisy.
So I think, again, like any disruption, you know, this is probably one of the most intense disruptions we see in our industry, but it has a big impact on the society. It has a big impact on most of the business. You know, all the various surveys we've done, you would have heard over the last 2 days, very clearly indicate that. What's important for us is, let's see what's the half glass full opportunity. There are many relevant, very complex problems of humanity, of business, in industry, in society that can be solved with a technology like Gen AI. Of course, we need to ensure while we do all of this, we take care of the risks. We talked about it a lot. And eventually, we have to always recognize it's the human at the center, the people at the center who need to manage it and not let somebody else decide it for them. So that would be my advice. But it's, again, a great opportunity for all of us to see and make the best of it. Yeah.
I think it's very, very exciting that there is no dearth of opportunity. Whatever industry you're in, what size of business you are, what products and services you build, there is opportunity to use AI and generative AI for productivity, for experience, for efficiency. I think the balancing act for all of us as technologists and business leaders in technology or in any business is this necessity to figure out how do we do it in a fair and equitable fashion. And never before, I think, in our history, as technology practitioners and people working in tech, have we had that responsibility of having to decide what will the product or service I build do, not just do for humanity. That's been the story of tech for so long, but do to humanity, do to our humanity. That, I think, is a consideration we've never had to work with in the past, or not to this extent. And I do again say we are perhaps far more unqualified at this point in time to deal with it. Both to the point on regulations from the government side and to this topic, the amazing news is places like this is the right place, and more like this is the place to have conversations and to learn from each other. And you know, I'm personally spending a couple of days here to do just that, and I hope everyone else is too. Because this is a time in humanity when dialogue and conversation, keeping egos aside, is very, very important for our future as a race.
Thank you for that. Just a couple of points from my side. I think the $1 trillion opportunity and whatever the number ends up being, I think it's very real. The majority of the conversations we're seeing today and we're having are around productivity, efficiency, experience, and cost, which are not unimportant, but I think we need to be thinking about the next horizon, where there's a lot of value unlock, which is on the revenue uplift, and what is the transformation we need to do at an organizational level for that revenue uplift, I think should be a central agenda for business leaders. So that's one. I think on the topic of risks, we've had some excellent examples, and I completely agree. The AI risks are real. The limited point for leaders is that while we need to be risk aware, we cannot be risk averse. I think the greatest risk of all is the risk of not doing anything. So let's remember there's speed. This space is moving very quickly, and some will be left behind if they don't play quickly enough. And the final point is around the humans at the center. I think there's a lot of talk and a lot of good work happening because we're focusing on skill sets. But I think it's equally important that we focus on mindsets as well. Again, there's humans at the center, and this disruption is impacting our workforce, not just the freshers, not just the mid-managers, but also top-level executives. So everything that we can do, and we are doing from a transformation perspective that keeps into account that there are people at stake here, and we need to be aware of that, I think will be very critical to the ultimate success of us building a $1 trillion economy through Gen AI that's sustainable and that we can be proud of. Daisy and Ashwin, thank you so much for your very valuable contributions, and thank you all.
For more content on tech and leadership, subscribe to NASSCOM YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.